The bank lobby fell silent. A tired father stood alone at the customer service counter, clutching a weathered brown envelope as though it contained the last pieces of hope he had left. His faded denim jacket was carefully stitched at the elbow. His work boots carried the dust of long hours, and beside him stood his 8-year-old daughter, quietly holding his hand. The branch manager glanced at them from across the polished marble floor. Her lips curled into a faint smile that wasn't friendly. Then she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Sir, I think you're in the wrong branch." What happened over the next 20 minutes would leave every employee, every customer, and even the manager herself questioning how they judged people by appearance. But before we continue, if stories about kindness, second chances, and the extraordinary power of compassion touch your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Kindness Corner Stories, and share it with someone who believes that respect should never depend on wealth or appearance. And tell us in the comments, which city and country are you watching from? We'd love to know where our kindness family is growing around the world. Now, let's begin. Daniel Carter had never imagined that life could change so completely in just 3 years. Once, he had shared every responsibility with his wife, Melissa. Together they laughed over simple dinners, celebrated Emma's birthdays with homemade cakes, and dreamed about watching their daughter grow into a confident young woman. They never had much money, but their little family had always felt rich in the ways that mattered. Everything changed on a rainy autumn evening. Melissa was driving home from work when a distracted driver ran a red light. The phone call Daniel received that night shattered the future they had planned together. From that moment forward, he became both father and mother to 8-year-old Emma. Every morning began before sunrise. Daniel worked as a maintenance technician for a local apartment complex. His hands were rough from repairing broken pipes, replacing damaged wiring, and fixing heating systems during freezing winters. By the time most people were enjoying dinner with their families, he was often taking extra repair jobs just to keep up with rent, school supplies, and medical bills. Yet no matter how exhausted he felt, he never let Emma believe they were poor. To her, every bedtime story sounded magical, every homemade pancake felt like a celebration, every hug reminded her she still had a family. That morning, Emma sat beside him on the city bus wearing her favorite blue sweater. "Dad," she whispered, "are you nervous?" Daniel smiled gently, a little. "Everything's going to be okay." He squeezed her tiny hand. "I hope you're right." Inside the worn envelope were documents he had spent months gathering. His landlord had decided to sell the apartment building, forcing every tenant to move within 60 days. Daniel had finally saved enough for a modest down payment on a small townhouse in a quiet neighborhood near Emma's elementary school. It wasn't luxurious. The paint needed work. The backyard fence leaned slightly to one side, but to Daniel, it represented something priceless, a permanent home, a place where Emma could decorate her own bedroom without worrying they would have to leave. Again, the mortgage appointment at Sterling National Bank was the final step before making that dream a reality. Daniel had carefully ironed his only button-down shirt the night before, but when an emergency water pipe burst at work early that morning, he spent 3 hours helping elderly tenants keep their apartments from flooding. By the time he finished, his shirt was stained beyond saving. He almost canceled the appointment. Instead, he changed back into his clean work jacket, apologized silently for his appearance, and reminded himself that honest work was never something to be ashamed of. Emma looked up at the impressive glass building as they approached the entrance. "Wow, this place is beautiful." Daniel smiled. "It is. Do you think they'll help us?" He looked down at the envelope in his hands, took a slow breath, and answered with quiet confidence. "They're here to help people, sweetheart." Neither of them realized that before the hour was over, the greatest lesson waiting inside that beautiful building would have nothing to do with money. Daniel gently pushed open the heavy glass doors, and the cool air inside the bank immediately replaced the summer heat outside. The lobby sparkled beneath elegant crystal lights, while polished marble floors reflected the movement of customers dressed in expensive suits and designer clothes. Emma instinctively moved closer to her father, holding his hand a little tighter. "It's okay," Daniel whispered with a reassuring smile. "We're exactly where we need to be." He walked toward the reception desk, where a sharply dressed woman wearing a silver name badge looked up from her computer. The badge read, "Rebecca Collins, Branch Manager." Rebecca gave Daniel a quick glance before her eyes settled on his dusty boots, worn jacket, and the faded envelope tucked under his arm. Her professional smile disappeared almost instantly. "Can I help you?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Yes, ma'am," Daniel replied politely. "I have a mortgage appointment scheduled for 10 o'clock. Rebecca typed his name into the system, then looked back at him with raised eyebrows. "You have an appointment here?" "Yes." She looked at Emma, then back at Daniel. "Sir, are you sure you didn't mean our community branch across town? This is Sterling National's Executive Banking Center." Several nearby customers glanced over, curious about the conversation. Daniel remained calm. "I confirmed the appointment twice. My loan officer emailed me yesterday." Rebecca folded her arms. "I understand, but this branch primarily serves premium clients." Daniel offered a respectful smile. "I was simply told to come here." Rebecca sighed dramatically before speaking louder than necessary. "Well, people usually come dressed appropriately when discussing six-figure mortgages." A few customers exchanged amused looks. One man quietly chuckled, another. Woman shook her head as if Daniel had made an embarrassing mistake. Emma looked down at the floor. Daniel noticed her expression immediately. He knelt beside her. "Remember what Mom always said?" Emma nodded softly. "Kind people don't judge." "That's right." He stood again, facing Rebecca without the slightest hint of anger. "I understand appearances matter," he said gently. "But I came straight from work after helping repair a flooded apartment building." "I apologize if I'm underdressed," Rebecca barely acknowledged his explanation. "I'm afraid our loan specialists are very busy today." Daniel reached into his envelope and carefully removed his appointment. "Confirmation. I don't mind waiting." Rebecca glanced at the paper, but made no effort to read it. Instead, she turned toward one of the security guards standing near the entrance. "Mark." The guard approached. "Yes, Miss Collins?" Rebecca lowered her voice only slightly. "I think this gentleman may be confused. Please help him find the correct branch." The words echoed louder than she intended. Almost everyone in the lobby heard them. Daniel looked at the security guard with complete composure. "I assure you, sir, I'm not confused." Mark hesitated. Unlike Rebecca, he saw something different. He noticed Daniel's calm voice. He noticed Emma nervously clutching her backpack. Most importantly, he noticed that Daniel had remained respectful despite being treated unfairly. "Would you mind if I verify the appointment first?" Mark asked. Rebecca frowned. "I already told you." Daniel quietly handed Mark the printed confirmation. The guard studied it for several seconds. His expression changed. "It actually does show an appointment here." Rebecca quickly snatched the paper from his hands. There must be some mistake. She typed furiously into her computer again, clearly expecting to prove herself right. But Daniel's appointment appeared once more. Room 12. Senior Mortgage Advisor, 10 o'clock sharp. Rebecca's face tightened. Instead of apologizing, she forced a small laugh. Computers make mistakes all the time. Daniel simply nodded. I understand. Rather than admitting the system was correct, Rebecca made another decision, one that would soon change the atmosphere of the entire bank. She picked up the phone. I'd like executive operations informed that we have an unusual situation in the lobby. Several customers looked directly at Daniel now. Whispers spread across the room. Maybe he's trying to scam the bank. Why would someone dressed like that be here? Poor kid. Emma's cheeks turned red as she heard the comments. She tugged gently on her father's sleeve. Dad, Daniel bent down again. Don't listen to them. But they're laughing. He smiled with remarkable peace. People can only judge what they see. They don't know our story, Emma nodded, trying not to cry. Daniel carefully placed the old envelope back against his chest, not because it contained money, but because inside it were the dreams of a little girl waiting for a place she could finally call home. Across the lobby, an elevator door quietly opened. Several executives stepped out, followed by a tall man in a navy suit, engaged in conversation with members of the bank's leadership team. Rebecca immediately straightened her posture. The CEO is here, one employee whispered. Every staff member became alert. Rebecca smiled confidently, certain that within moments the CEO would support her decision and have Daniel escorted out. She had no idea that the man walking toward the lobby was about to recognize someone he had never forgotten, and that the next few moments would leave the entire bank standing in stunned silence. The quiet conversations across the lobby faded as the group of executives approached. At their center walked Michael Harrison, the CEO of Sterling National Bank. His confident stride reflected years of leadership, yet there was nothing arrogant about the way he carried himself. He acknowledged employees with a nod, greeted customers with a smile, and listened carefully as an executive beside him reviewed the day's schedule. Rebecca quickly stepped forward. Good morning, Mr. Harrison. Good morning, Rebecca, Michael replied. She smiled professionally before lowering her voice. We have a small situation in the lobby. A gentleman appears to have entered the executive banking center by mistake. Security is handling it. Michael gave a brief nod without looking up. Very well. Rebecca felt relieved. This would be over in seconds. But as Michael took another step, his eyes drifted across the lobby. They landed on Daniel. He stopped walking. His expression changed instantly. The executives behind him nearly bumped into one another as they realized their CEO had frozen in place. For a long moment, Michael simply stared. His eyes moved from Daniel's weathered jacket to the familiar brown envelope, then to the little girl standing quietly beside him. A gentle smile slowly appeared on his face. Without saying another word, he left the executives behind and walked directly toward Daniel. The lobby became so quiet that even the soft tapping of Michael's polished shoes echoed across the marble floor. Rebecca watched. Confidently, he's probably going to ask security to escort him outside, she thought. Customers turned to watch. Employees stopped typing. Even the security guard stepped aside. Michael stopped only a few feet away. Daniel looked up, slightly confused. For a brief moment, neither man spoke. Then, to everyone's complete surprise, the CEO extended his hand with both respect and gratitude. Good morning, he smiled. Warmly, sir, a gasp rippled through the lobby. Rebecca's confident smile disappeared. One customer actually dropped the folder he was holding. Emma looked up at her father in confusion. Dad, does he know you? Daniel looked equally surprised. I'm not sure, Michael's eyes became slightly emotional. I was hoping we'd meet again. Someday? Daniel searched his face carefully. There was something familiar, something about the man's smile. But 15 years had changed them both. I'm sorry, Daniel admitted softly. Have we met before? Michael laughed gently. You probably don't remember. He turned toward Emma. You must be Emma. She nodded politely. Yes, sir. Michael smiled. Your father once taught me something that changed my entire life. Every employee in the lobby stood completely still. Rebecca looked from Daniel to Michael, unable to understand what was happening. How could the CEO of one of the country's largest banks be speaking to a maintenance worker with such genuine respect? Michael looked back at Daniel. You still carry that same envelope? Daniel glanced down at it. It's become a habit. Michael chuckled. It certainly has. He turned to his executive. Assistant, please postpone my next meeting. Of course. Sir, and reserve the executive conference room. Rebecca blinked in disbelief. The executive conference room was usually reserved for board members, major investors, and government officials. Never ordinary customers. Michael looked back at Daniel. Would you and your daughter join me? Daniel hesitated. I don't want to cause any trouble. Michael smiled. 15 years ago? He paused, emotion filling his voice. You walked into a different office carrying that very same envelope. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. A memory flickered. An old community bank, a frightened young businessman, a desperate conversation. Then, recognition slowly appeared on Daniel's face. Michael? The CEO nodded. Yes. Daniel stared at him in complete disbelief. I can't believe it. Neither could anyone else. Rebecca felt her heartbeat quicken. She had never seen her CEO speak to anyone this way, certainly not someone she had nearly asked security to remove. Michael gently placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. I've waited 15 years to thank you properly. The words echoed. Through the silent lobby, Rebecca whispered to herself. Thank him. For what? Michael looked around the room, noticing every curious face. Then he spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. Most people believe success is built by intelligence, hard work, or luck. He looked directly at Daniel. I know differently. He paused. Sometimes an entire future is built because one stranger chooses kindness when they have absolutely nothing to gain. No one moved. No one even whispered. Rebecca could barely breathe. Yuckle looked at Daniel with eyes full of gratitude. I think everyone here deserves to know what happened 15 years ago. Daniel lowered his eyes modestly. There really isn't much to tell, Michael smiled. That's exactly what makes it unforgettable. As they walked toward the executive conference room, every employee and customer instinctively stepped aside, creating a clear path through the lobby. The same people who had quietly judged Daniel only minutes earlier now watched him with a completely different kind of respect. Emma slipped her small hand into her father's. Again, she looked up at him with shining eyes. Dad? Yes, sweetheart? I told you everything was going to be okay. Daniel smiled, his eyes beginning to glisten. You certainly did. Behind them, Rebecca remained frozen beside the reception desk, replaying every word she had spoken since Daniel entered the bank. For the first time in her career, she wasn't worried about a customer complaint. She was afraid she had misunderstood the true meaning of professionalism, and inside the conference room, Michael Harrison prepared to tell a story that would forever change how everyone in Sterling National Bank defined wealth, dignity, and respect. The executive conference room overlooked the entire city, but no one paid attention to the breathtaking view. Every eye was on Daniel. Michael invited him and Emma to sit at the long oak table before turning to the executives, Rebecca, and several employees who had quietly gathered near the doorway. "I want all of you to hear this," Michael said. He took a slow breath. 15 years ago, I wasn't the CEO of Sterling National Bank. A faint smile crossed his face. I wasn't even close. The room remained perfectly still. I was 28 years old, trying to build a small construction company. I'd invested everything I had, my savings, my parents' retirement money, even borrowed from friends who believed in me. Then my biggest client unexpectedly declared bankruptcy. Michael looked down for a moment, remembering the pain. Overnight, my business collapsed. I came to a small neighborhood bank hoping for one last chance. Every application had been rejected. Every meeting ended the same way. He paused. They all told me I was too risky. Daniel quietly lowered his eyes. I remember a young man who looked completely exhausted. Michael smiled. That young man was me, he continued. The loan officer said there was only one way I could qualify. I needed someone willing to guarantee part of the loan. Rebecca frowned. Did you know each other? Michael shook his head. No. I had never seen Daniel Carter before that day. The room fell silent again. Michael looked at Daniel with deep gratitude. He was waiting in line, carrying a brown envelope. He overheard my conversation, Daniel smiled modestly. I only listened because you looked like you were about to lose hope. Michael nodded. I was. He looked around the room. Daniel didn't ask about profits. He didn't ask for ownership. He didn't ask for interest. He simply asked one question. Michael's voice softened. If someone believed in you today, would you spend the rest of your life becoming the kind of man who helps someone else tomorrow? Several employees exchanged emotional glances. I answered yes. Michael smiled. And he believed me. Daniel finally spoke. My wife always said that kindness isn't measured by how much we have. It's measured by what we're willing to share. Michael nodded. Daniel signed the guarantee. The loan saved my company. I worked day and night. Years later, that tiny construction business became successful enough to merge with another company. He looked around the conference room. That success eventually brought me here. Rebecca whispered almost to herself. So, everything started because one stranger trusted. You, Michael answered without hesitation. Exactly. He walked toward Daniel. I searched for you for years, but you'd moved after your wife passed. Away! Daniel looked surprised. You knew about Melissa. Michael nodded respectfully. When I finally learned what happened, I chose not to disturb your family. Emma gently reached for her father's hand. Michael smiled warmly at her. Your dad never told you this story, did he? Emma shook her head. He says helping people isn't something you brag about. Michael laughed. Softly. That's exactly why he deserves every bit of respect in this room. He turned toward Rebecca. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. She stepped forward. Mr. Carter, her voice trembled. I owe you an apology. Daniel looked at her kindly. You don't owe me anything. No. She shook her head. I judged you before. I knew your story. I saw your clothes instead of your character. I embarrassed you in front of your daughter. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I'm truly sorry. Daniel smiled with the same quiet kindness he had shown from the beginning. We all make mistakes. The important part is what we learn afterward. Rebecca nodded, unable to speak. Michael looked at every employee gathered in the room. I want everyone to remember something. He spoke slowly, making sure every word carried. Wait, a luxury suit doesn't guarantee integrity. A worn jacket doesn't diminish dignity. The Size of a person's bank account tells you nothing about the size of their heart. Never confuse appearance with worth. The room erupted into heartfelt applause, not because the CEO had finished speaking, but because everyone understood the lesson. Daniel hadn't earned respect. Because he once helped a future CEO, he had earned it long before. That through humility, compassion, and quiet integrity. Later that afternoon, Daniel met with the mortgage advisor. His application had already been approved. Within an hour, he signed the final documents. As he and Emma walked toward the exit, Michael caught up with them. "You finally have your home," Daniel smiled. Thanks to years of hard work, Michael extended his hand once more. "No, Daniel. Thanks to the kind of father you've chosen to be." Emma looked proudly at her dad as they stepped outside into the warm afternoon sunlight. She wrapped both arms around him. "When we move into our new house," she whispered, "can we plant a tree for Mom?" Daniel felt tears fill his eyes. I think she'd love that. Together they walked down the sidewalk, not as wealthy people, not as important people, but as a father and daughter carrying something far more valuable than either: respect, hope, and a kindness that had quietly changed countless lives. Before this story comes to an end, we'd like to thank you for spending these moments with us. If Daniel's journey touched your heart and reminded you that true character is far more valuable than appearances, please subscribe to Kindness Corner Stories. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that inspire compassion, hope, and humanity. And always remember, the richest people in the world are not those who are recognized everywhere they go. They are the ones whose kindness is remembered long after they leave. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.